The streetlights on Alder Row buzzed like tired insects flickering in the cold spring air. A thin mist hovered over the pavement, blurring the line between the sidewalks and the shadows. 9-year-old Ethan stood barefoot on the concrete landing of his grandmother's apartment building, hugging a small stuffed bear to his chest so tightly that it seemed strained. He shouldn't have been outside. His grandmother had told him to stay in the bedroom to keep the door shut and the curtains closed. But the yelling had pushed through the thin walls, raw and violent, chasing him down the hallway until his small hands shook too much to turn the lock. Inside, Ray's voice ricocheted like thrown bottles, slurred, jagged, unpredictable. Ethan couldn't hear the words anymore. He only heard impact. A chair scraping across the linoleum. Something heavy hitting the wall. The muffled cry that followed. His grandmother's cry. He tucked the stuffed bear under his chin and whispered into its matted fur, "Please stop. Please stop." His breath came out shaky white in the cold air. His toes curled against the rough concrete, as if he could anchor himself against everything breaking upstairs. Then it came, a crack sharp and unmistakable. Ethan flinched, his whole body jolting like a leaf caught in a storm. He backed away from the stairwell door, heart pounding. He couldn't tell if the sound was a plate, a picture frame, or his grandmother's voice splintering under the weight of Ray's rage. He had heard this kind of sound before. He squeezed the stuffed bear tighter. No, no, no. A second crack, followed by Ray's low, crooked laugh. Something snapped inside him, something small, fragile, and desperate. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He just ran. Down the steps, through the chipped metal door, and out onto the sidewalk where the street lights flickered overhead like unreliable guardians. Ethan stumbled to the curb, breath, heaving, tears streaking down his face. The stuffed bear slipped from his fingers and landed on the wet pavement. He didn't pick it up. His little hands pressed against his cheeks as he stared at the dark street, hoping without knowing what hope even looked like. Then he shouted. "He hit my grandma." The words tore out of him, raw, shrill, breaking in the middle. He screamed it again, louder, this time voice shredding. "He hit my grandma. Somebody help." The neighborhood windows stayed dark. Doors stayed shut. A car rolled past at the far end of the block, slowed for a moment, then kept going. Alder Row had heard too many screams, too many crashes. People had learned that opening a door could open the wrong kind of trouble. Ethan cried harder, shoulders shaking as he bent down and grabbed his stuffed bear again, pressing its worn head into his chest. He wasn't sure if he wanted people or silence, but he knew he didn't want the sound of Ray's anger reaching him from upstairs again. And then, from the far end of the street, a rumble. Low, heavy, metallic, the kind of sound that didn't just travel, it arrived. Ethan looked up, eyes wide and wet. The rumble deepened, multiplied, turned into a rolling growl that vibrated through the pavement. Streetlights trembled. Loose flyers pinned to poles fluttered. Bottles on porches rattled. It wasn't one engine. It was several. The kind of engines people crossed the street to avoid in daylight. Ethan stepped back toward the apartment steps, clutching the bear to his chest. He didn't know if he should hide, or wave, or run, or freeze. Then the first motorcycle rounded the corner. A big one, matte black chrome, glinting under the streetlight like a blade pulled halfway from its sheath. Behind it came another. Then another. A line of bikes in tight formation, lights sweeping the street like slow-moving spotlights. At the front was Reed. Tall, broad-shouldered. Leather vest weathered by years of storms and miles. A black bandana wrapped around one wrist, scuffed boots that touched pavement like he owned it. When he eased to a stop, the growl of the engine faded to a heavy, steady thrum, controlled, confident, unhurried. Reed killed the engine and swung a leg off the bike. Silence rushed in behind him. Only Ethan's shaky breath filled the space. Reed looked at the boy like he already knew him, like he had seen dozens like him, and never once stopped caring. His eyes scanned the bruises on Ethan's arms, the bare feet, the stuffed bear clutched against a trembling chest. "You, the one who called out." His voice was low, gravelly, but not sharp. Ethan swallowed, nodded. Reed crouched down, resting one forearm on his knee, lowering himself to eye level. The big man didn't crowd him. He didn't reach for him. He didn't even speak for a long second. Just let the boy see that he was safe, that he had time to breathe. "Tell me what happened," Reed said quietly. Ethan's voice cracked. "He hit my grandma. He threw things. The words tumbled out, tangled and breathless. She's still inside." Reed lifted his chin, eyes sliding up toward the third-floor window, where a dim yellow lamp glowed behind curtains that had seen better years. Behind Reed, the other riders shut off their engines one by one, the rumble dying into echoes. Reed stood up slowly. "Stay right here with me." He glanced toward his crew, each one already stepping off their bikes, each face shadowed by helmets, each stance calm and grounded. They didn't come for a fight. They came because one kid screamed into the night, and someone finally answered. Reed checked the stairwell door. It hung crooked, kicked too many times, hinges loose. A dull thud echoed from inside the building, something heavy falling or someone pushed into something heavier. Ethan flinched. Reed didn't. He reached into his vest pocket, pulled out his phone and dialed without taking his eyes off the stairwell. "Yeah. Domestic disturbance. Third floor. Send EMS too," he said. "Kids outside. Looks shaken." He hung up. Then he knelt one more time. "You did the right thing, kid," he said. "A brave thing." "No one else came," Ethan whispered. Reed looked at him a long moment, long enough for Ethan to see the truth etched into the man's face. "They're here now." Another crash sounded upstairs, sharper this time. Reed rose steady and deliberate, and nodded to two of the riders. They flanked the stairwell like quiet walls of denim and steel. Ethan hugged his bear so tight its little head bent sideways. Reed stepped toward the stairs. Behind him the riders stood like sentries. In front of him, up those broken steps, was the sound of a woman trying to survive another man's anger. Reed put one hand on the rail. No hesitation, just purpose. The kind that makes engines cross cities, and men who once hid become men who stand. The hallway light flickered once overhead. Then Reed climbed the stairs, and that was the moment the street stopped being silent. The hallway on the third floor reeked of stale beer and old wall paint. Reed stopped outside the apartment door, feeling the vibrations through the cracked frame, heavy footsteps, a muttered curse, the unmistakable shuffle of someone trying to stay conscious. He didn't need to see the scene yet. He already knew the type of man behind that door. He'd grown up with one. He waited until the riders positioned themselves quietly behind him, two at the railing, one by the stairs, another watching the dim corridor. No threats, no theatrics, just presence. Reed knocked once. A voice inside spat back. What another impact followed, soft like someone collapsing onto the couch. Reed didn't answer. He knocked again, knuckles firm, steady. He kept his stance, wide spine, straight head, slightly angled to see through the crack as the door jolted open. Ray filled the doorway with breath sour from whiskey and eyes glassy with fear disguised as anger. He had a cut above his eyebrow and the twitchy look of a man realizing control had slipped through his fingers. "What the hell do you want?" Ray slurred, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Reed didn't flinch, didn't blink. "EMS is on the way," he said, voice level. "Step aside." Ray barked a laugh that died halfway out of his throat. His gaze flicked down the hallway, caught sight of the riders waiting like silent statues. "You brought them," his sneer wavered. "What, you think I'm scared?" Reed stepped forward. Not aggressive, not threatening. Just close enough for Ray to understand there was no world in which he could push this man back. "Move," Reed repeated. Ray's bravado cracked. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard like he'd tasted reality for the first time. His eyes darted again toward the window, the back room, anywhere but the door Reed was filling. Behind him on the couch, Ethan's grandmother was struggling to sit up. Her thin hands trembled as she clutched the armrest, trying to pull air into bruised ribs. Ray blocked her from view instinctively, positioning his body to hide what he'd done. A tell. Reed didn't miss it. "Last time, I'm going to say it," Reed murmured. Ray stepped back. The door swung open wider. Reed entered. The apartment looked like a storm had passed through. Broken lamp on the floor, shattered picture frame, a dark smear on the wall where something or someone had hit. But the thing that hit Reed's chest hardest wasn't what Ray had done tonight. It was what it reminded him of. For a split second he saw another apartment, another night, another woman with trembling hands trying to downplay the bleeding at her lip. A boy pressing himself into the corner behind the couch, hoping the neighbors wouldn't pretend nothing was happening. Reed blinked, jaw tightening. The memory faded, but the muscle it hit stayed tense. He approached Ethan's grandmother carefully. "Ma'am," he said softly, kneeling beside the couch. "Help's coming. You're safe now." She nodded, though her eyes darted nervously toward Ray. Reed placed himself in her line of sight, blocking her view of him entirely. "No one touches you again tonight," he said. Ray's breathing sharpened. "I didn't," she slipped. "Told her to watch where she—" Reed turned his head slightly. His stare was quiet expression, unreadable, but there was something in it, something that made Ray's voice collapse. "You done lying?" Reed asked. Ray stumbled back a step, bumping into the dining table. The bravado drained from him like someone had pulled a plug in his spine. He didn't apologize, wouldn't ever, but he folded into himself, shrinking under the weight of a man who didn't even bother raising his voice. In the hallway, boots thudded as paramedics climbed the stairs. Reed looked to the nearest rider and nodded. The man stepped aside, clearing the way for EMS. They swept into the room with practiced urgency, kneeling beside Ethan's grandmother, asking gentle questions. Reed stayed near the door, eyes locked on Ray, not in challenge but in quiet containment, like he was holding the air steady so no one else would break. "Is the boy outside?" a paramedic asked. Reed nodded. "He's safe." They lifted Ethan's grandmother onto a stretcher. Her hand shook as she reached for something, anything to hold. Reed caught her fingers, gently steadying them. "He's waiting for you," he said. "He's all right." Her eyes softened. For the first time that night she looked relieved. When EMS guided her out, Reed stepped aside to let them pass. Down the stairs the riders cleared a path, their big frames moving with unexpected gentleness as they held the railing for her. Ray sagged against the table head, lowered as sirens neared from a distance. "You think this makes you a hero," he muttered, voice thin. Reed didn't look at him. "I'm not here for you," he said. He followed the paramedics out. The night air outside hit him, the cooler temperature, the faint scent of car oil from the street, the hum of distant traffic. Ethan stood under the streetlight, stuffed bear clutched to his chest, eyes wide as they met Reed's. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. Reed crouched, so their gaze aligned. "She's going to be okay," Reed said quietly. Ethan blinked fast, lower lip trembling. Can I go with her? You will, Reed nodded. Ride with her in the ambulance. They'll take care of both of you. Ethan's fingers tightened on the bear. Another rider offered the crew's leather jacket, two big sleeves dragging on the pavement, but Ethan slipped into it as if the weight made him feel steadier. Reed stood watching the ambulance doors close its red lights, washing over the cracked pavement. Then the police cruiser pulled up. Ray appeared in the doorway of the apartment building, arms crossed, chin lifted like he was trying to piece his ego back together, but fear still pulled at the edges of his expression. The officer walked past him, first straight toward Reed. "Did you make the call?" the officer asked. Reed nodded once. The officer stepped aside. "We'll handle him." Ray stiffened eyes darting anywhere but toward Reed. Reed didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply stepped back the riders, forming a quiet line beside him, not a threat, just a witness. The cruiser door shut. The sirens faded. Ethan peered through the ambulance window as it started rolling, his small hand pressed to the glass. Reed raised his hand back. Not big, not dramatic, just steady, the kind of gesture he wished someone had made for him when he was 9. And as the ambulance disappeared down Alder Row, Reed felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, the sharp, familiar ache of a past he thought he'd outrun finally finding its purpose. Tonight wasn't the last ride. It was the first. The night clung to Reed long after the ambulance left. Even when the red lights disappeared around the corner, the echo of them stayed stamped across the inside of his skull. He stood on Alder Row long enough for the street to grow quiet again, for the riders behind him to settle into a stillness that didn't need words. When he finally swung a leg over his bike, the engine's low hum felt different, heavier, like it was carrying someone else's breath, someone else's story. They rode out together, the streetlights streaking across their helmets, the cold wind slicing the night clean. No one spoke over comms. They didn't have to. Every rider there had once walked through a door, like the one Reed had pushed open. Every one of them had stood on a staircase listening for the kind of silence that meant things were about to get worse. By the time Reed reached his garage on the far edge of town, a converted warehouse with a single floodlight buzzing over the entrance, the adrenaline had cooled into something thicker. Not rage, not relief, something older buried deeper. He parked the bike inside the echo of the engine bouncing off the metal walls, before fading into a hum of late-night quiet. Tools lined the pegboard. Half-finished bike frames rested on stands like skeletons mid-repair. The air smelled of oil dust and something comforting he could never name. Reed tugged off his gloves and tossed them onto the workbench. His hands were shaking. He stared at them like they didn't belong to him. The last time they'd shaken like this, he'd been a kid gripping a cracked doorknob, waiting for the yelling to stop, waiting for someone to step into the hallway and ask if he was okay. No one ever had. Reed exhaled long and slow. He walked to the small fridge, tucked beside the tool cabinet, cracked it open and grabbed a bottle of water, instead of the beer staring back at him. He pressed the cold plastic to his temple until the shaking quieted. The warehouse felt too silent. He flicked on the radio, old rock static at the edges, usually calming. Tonight, it only reminded him how loud that apartment had been, how loud the world had become for one kid clutching a stuffed bear. He set the water down and sank onto an old rolling stool. His leather vest creaked as he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head lowered. He didn't want to see the images replaying behind his eyelids, but they came anyway. Not tonight's, not Ray, not the shattered frame on the floor. But the memory that had clawed its way loose the moment he stepped into that apartment, a bottle hitting the wall just above his head, his mother's trembling hands, the look on her face when she realized no one was coming. He hadn't felt that small in years. He rubbed the heels of his palms into his eyes until the memory blurred. The warehouse door rattled soft, then firmer. Reed lifted his head. Diesel pushed it open, stepping inside with the slow heaviness of someone who knew exactly what was going on inside Reed's mind. He didn't ask to come in, didn't ask if Reed wanted company. He just closed the door, took a seat on a nearby bucket, and cracked his knuckles. "You good?" Diesel asked. Reed didn't answer right away. He looked at the floor at the oil stain, shaped like a rough circle, something he'd noticed 100 times but never really seen. "Kid's face," Reed muttered, "the way he grabbed my wrist. I wasn't ready for that." Diesel nodded, rubbing his jaw. "Hits harder when it's the same kind of fear you used to wear." Reed's throat tightened. He wasn't a man who liked talking about his past. He wasn't a man who talked much at all. But tonight the words pushed up without asking permission. "When I was his age, there were nights I'd hide behind the washing machine," Reed said quietly. "Couldn't breathe. Couldn't look at the door. Just waited for it to be over." Diesel didn't speak. He let the silence stretch, not uncomfortable, not judgmental, just steady. Reed's chest rose with a slow breath. Seeing Ethan like that, it was like looking at my own fear wearing a new face. Diesel leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You gave him something you didn't get, Reed. Doesn't make the past go away, but it makes tonight count for something." Reed nodded, but his jaw stayed clenched. The shaking had stopped, but the heaviness hadn't. There was one thought he couldn't shake, one that had gripped him the moment Ethan shouted, "He hit my grandma," into the night air. If no one had answered that scream, if he hadn't been there, what would have happened? Reed swallowed hard. "I keep seeing the door," he said. "How long it took to open. Makes you want to kick down every door like it," Diesel replied. "But you know better." Reed did. He knew that barging through every threshold in anger wouldn't fix the world, wouldn't rewrite his past, wouldn't save everyone. But he also knew that answering one cry had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten. The kid he once was still lived inside him. And that kid had waited years for someone like him to show up. Diesel stood clapping a hand on Reed's shoulder with a gentleness that didn't match his size. "Go home. Rest. Tomorrow we check on the boy." Reed nodded again, slower this time. After Diesel left, Reed walked toward the small office in the back corner. He opened the drawer where he kept old mementos, patches, letters, trinkets. At the bottom, wrapped in a faded scrap of bandana cloth, was a toy robot. Paint chipped, plastic cracked, left arm missing. He picked it up the way you hold something fragile, something once loved, into pieces. He sat with it in his hands for a long time. Finally, he whispered, barely a breath, barely a voice, "We're gonna do better now." He set the robot on the workbench under the warm glow of the shop light. Then he turned off the radio, shut the warehouse door, and walked into the cold night with a new weight in his steps, not the weight of memories but the weight of responsibility finally shaping itself into purpose. Because tonight had shown him something he hadn't realized until he heard Ethan scream there was still a child inside him. And he finally knew how to protect him. The bar lights in Harbor's End Tavern were dim enough to hide most regrets, but bright enough to reveal the men who carried them. Reed pushed the door open and stepped into the low hum of conversations, clinking glasses, and the occasional scrape of a chair across worn wooden floors. The riders were already there. Diesel leaned against the booth's edge, big arms folded over his chest. Hawk sat beside him, tracing a thumb along the rim of his glass. Mercy had her jacket draped over the seat back, her hair tied up in a loose knot, eyes sharp even in the soft glow. Two more riders, Shade and Cutter, were sorting through a stack of folded papers spread across the table. They all looked up the moment Reed approached. Not with pity, not with curiosity, but with recognition. "You took your time," Diesel said, sliding over to make room. Reed grunted, lowering himself into the booth. "Needed a minute." Mercy nudged a glass of water toward him. "Take two if you want." Reed didn't drink. He rested his hands on the table, fingers interlaced to keep them steady. The others waited, silent, patient, like they'd all been at this edge before. Shade lifted one of the papers and tapped it. "We got the guy's record," she said. "Ray Randall. 2 priors for assault, 1 bar fight, 1 domestic complaint. Both dropped before trial." Cutter added, "And he's looking spooked. Moved out of his place tonight. Neighbor says he left with a duffel bag." Reed's jaw tightened. "Running. Like cowards do," Diesel muttered. Mercy leaned back, her gaze fixed on Reed. "That kid and his grandmother, what happened to them, isn't going away with one police report. You know that." Reed nodded slowly. "I know." The bar's jukebox changed tracks, the bass thumping low under the murmur of customers. Someone laughed loudly near the back. A waitress wove between tables, balancing a tray of beers. Normal life surged around them, busy, chaotic, indifferent. Reed waited until the noise settled enough to speak. "I don't want this to be a one-night thing," he said. "Not just a rescue, not just showing up because luck had us nearby." Hawk raised his brows. "You want to make it official?" Reed looked up, eyes steady. "I want us to be the call people make when no one else listens." A slow, deliberate silence followed. Diesel nodded once, like he'd expected this moment. Mercy smirked faintly. "About damn time you said it out loud." Shade leaned forward. "So what's the plan?" Reed reached into his vest and pulled out a folded envelope, one he had picked up from the hospital earlier. Inside was a simple thank you note scrawled in shaky handwriting by Ethan's grandmother. He set it on the table. "This," he said softly, "this is why we ride. Not for fights, not for retaliation, for people who can't yell loud enough for anyone else to hear." Cutter drummed his fingers against the table. "Word will spread fast if we start doing this." Good, Reed replied. "Let it spread." Diesel placed a heavy hand on the table, leaning in. "You're talking about a network," he said. "Not just our block, not just our town." Reed met his eyes. "I'm talking about anyone who needs it." Mercy nodded, slowly thoughtful. "If we're doing this, we need more than good intentions. We need structure, rotation, coverage, code of conduct." Shade grinned. "Swear to protect the innocent. Swear not to start fights. Swear to show up when the call comes." Basically, a biker's version of a guardian oath. Reed didn't smile, but something in his features softened. Something like that. The riders exchanged glances, small nods, shared breaths. The idea wasn't just taking shape, it was taking root. Cutter spoke first. "I'm in." Shade followed. "Count me." Hawk raised his glass. "To the ones who needed us and didn't get us. And to the ones who will." Mercy touched her glass lightly to his. "To showing up." Reed didn't raise a glass. He just looked at them, each face lined by years of fights they never asked For each scar, a reminder of the people they once needed but didn't have. Then he set his hands flat on the table. "There's something else," he said. The riders stilled. Reed cleared his throat, voice lower now. "When Ethan grabbed my wrist earlier, it wasn't fear I saw in him. It was trust. The kind a kid gives only once. And that kind of trust comes with weight." Diesel's voice softened. "And you're feeling it." Reed nodded once. "Yeah, I am." He leaned back, letting the hum of the bar settle into the spaces between his words. "Tonight wasn't about breaking down a door or scaring a man like Ray," he said. "It was about being the wall between him and the people he hurt. That's what we should be. Walls. Not fists. Not flames. Just walls." Mercy exhaled, long and thoughtful. "Reed, that's a mission statement." Shade clapped her hands once. "We got ourselves a new chapter forming." Reed looked at each one of them, letting their faces imprint into memory. "You all sure?" he asked. Diesel cracked a small smile. "Reed, we showed up on a whim. Imagine what we can do with direction." The tension eased from Reed's shoulders. Not gone, never gone, but lighter, as if shared among the people who had chosen to sit with him tonight. Cutter lifted his glass. "To the first night," he said. Reed finally lifted his water. "To the next time someone screams and thinks nobody's coming." Glasses clinked. But under that sound, Reed felt something shift, quiet. Deep, steady. It wasn't the beginning of a fight. It was the beginning of an answer. One that would echo far beyond the walls of Harbor's End Tavern. And as Reed glanced at the bar's exit, he knew that every door he walked through from now on would carry the same promise. By the next morning, the air around Harbor's End felt different, charged like the quiet before a storm no one had predicted. Reed noticed it the moment he stepped out of his garage. Two neighbors, who normally avoided eye contact, nodded at him. A mail carrier paused, lips pressed tight, offering a subtle gesture of respect before moving on. People weren't looking away today. They were looking toward something, and that something was him, or rather what he and the riders had started. Reed swung his leg over his bike, preparing to check on the hospital first when his phone vibrated. Once. Then again. Then continuously until the notifications stacked so fast the screen froze for a moment. Group chats, private messages, missed calls. He frowned and opened the first one. It was a post. Not from any rider, not from Ethan's family, from a woman in a neighboring apartment complex who had recorded a short, shaky video of the bikers guiding EMS down the stairwell last night. The caption read, "This is what protection looks like. They came when no one else did." It had 30 shares. Then 300. By the time Reed scrolled, it had crossed 1,000. More comments poured in. "Where can we call them? I wish someone like this came when I was a kid." Finally, "Men who don't hide behind excuses." Reed exhaled, the weight behind his ribs, shifting part pressure, part purpose. Another message pinged from Mercy, "Get to the tavern. Now. You need to see this." Reed gunned the engine. Harbor's End Tavern, midday. The place was busier than any noon hour should have allowed. People filled the booths, talking in low, urgent voices. Someone had pulled the blinds halfway down, as if trying to filter the chaos from the outside world. Reed stepped inside and instantly saw the reason for the urgency. Mercy, Diesel, and Hawk were at the corner booth, surrounded by strangers, holding phones, screenshots, and printed messages. Shade and Cutter stood like gatekeepers at the table's edge, directing people back a step. The moment Reed appeared, the noise softened like the room itself recognized him. Mercy gestured him over. "You need to read these." She slid a stack of printed posts toward him. Reed skimmed. "My neighbor's boyfriend threw a lamp at her last night. He's still in the apartment. My daughter's ex won't stop coming to our door. Please, someone help. There's a kid in my building who screams every night. Nobody does anything." Reed felt the heat rise up his spine. Not anger, something deeper. The confirmation of a truth he'd always known. Pain wasn't rare. It was everywhere, and most of it stayed hidden behind thin doors. Hawk leaned in voice firm. "Reed people think we're official." Diesel huffed. "We're not even a real organization yet, and they're asking us to cover half the city." Mercy tapped the screen of her tablet, where a community group page refreshed every few seconds with new posts. "This isn't just attention," she said. "This is need. Real need." Reed didn't speak at first. He looked around the room at the faces, watching him, some scared, some tired, some quietly hopeful, all waiting for a sign. The jukebox hummed softly in the background. Reed set the papers down. "We're not vigilantes," he said. "If people think we're here to kick in doors, we'll drown in problems we can't solve." Shade folded her arms. "So what do we do?" Reed thought for a long moment. Not about Ray, not about the night before, but about Ethan gripping his wrist as though the world might fall apart if he let go. "We ride for intervention," he said slowly. "For presence, for safety, for getting the right help into the right hands." Mercy nodded. "Then we need rules," Hawk added, "and channels." Diesel pointed at the stack of messages. "And structure." Reed inhaled. "We build that," he said, voice steady. "But we do it carefully." A woman approached, then mid-40s, tired eyes, holding her phone like it weighed more than it should. She hesitated at their table. Reed turned toward her. "You all right, ma'am?" She swallowed. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I just saw what you did last night, and I wanted to say thank you for showing that not everyone turns away." Reed's throat tightened. "Glad someone felt safer because of it." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "More people need what that boy got." Then she slipped out the door, letting light spill briefly into the tavern before it dimmed again. Reed watched her leave. Then he looked at the riders one by one. "We need a way to reach people," Cutter said. "Something simple. Something anyone can use." Mercy snapped her fingers. "A hotline." Shade smirked. "A biker hotline." Hawk chuckled. "Sounds ridiculous." Diesel scratched his beard. "Sounds effective." Reed tapped his fingers once on the table. "No hotline," he said. "Not yet. Too dangerous without protocol." They quieted. Reed continued, "But a message, a coded one, something people can post if they need us, something that says, 'Look this way, don't ignore this.'" Mercy raised a brow. What kind of message? Reed thought back to the stairwell, the flicker of the hallway light, the kid shouting into the night because no one else would. He spoke slowly, something simple, easy to share, easy to type, hard to misunderstand. He picked up a napkin and wrote 2 words, "Check upstairs." Shade read it, eyes widening. Anyone posting that phrase is asking for eyes on a situation. Diesel finished. Mercy smiled, small, proud. "That's subtle. That's smart." Reed folded the napkin. "Spread it quietly," he said. "Circle to circle, person to person. We watch how it moves. If it grows too fast, we adapt." Hawk leaned back. "And if someone actually needs us," Reed's eyes darkened steady, "then we ride." The room went still, not with fear, not with excitement, but with a collective understanding. This wasn't a movement built on noise. This was a movement built on response. Reed stood. Outside, a cluster of people waited near the sidewalk, talking, glancing at the tavern door, unsure if they should come in or keep their distance. Word was spreading faster than any of them expected. Reed took a breath and stepped toward the exit. For the first time in years, he felt something settle into place behind his ribs, not the heaviness of memory, but the clarity of purpose. The whisper had become a wave, and he wasn't afraid of it. He was ready to stand in front of it. The first true test landed on a Sunday evening, wrapped in the kind of calm that always felt suspicious. Reed had spent most of the day in the garage, tools, scattered music, low hands, busy but mind drifting. The whole week had moved like a tide, pulling him towards something he couldn't name yet. As dusk spilled across the cracked concrete outside, Reed wiped grease from his fingers and checked his phone for the time. That was when he saw it. A single notification. One phrase. Two simple words. Check upstairs. Not from a rider. Not from someone he knew. But from an account in a local neighborhood group, a teenager named Amelia Carson. Reed's breath slowed. He clicked the post. Check upstairs. Apartment 2B. Please, someone. No details. No accusations. Just the code. Someone had heard the message. Someone had learned it. And someone was scared enough to use it. Reed grabbed his vest. The garage door slammed behind him as he stepped outside, dialing Mercy on his way to the bike. She answered on the first ring. Got it too, yeah, Reed said. Address came through, just sent it to the crew. Reed heard the tension in her voice, not panic, just sharp focus. That was good. He needed focus right now. Meet me there, he said. Minimal riders. Keep it quiet. On our way. Reed ended the call, swung onto his bike, and let the engine swallow the silence. Ridgeview Apartments 20 minutes later. The building sat at the edge of a cul-de-sac, its brick walls stained with age, its windows glowing faintly through years of dust and neglect. A place where people lived because they had nowhere else to go. A place where sounds got swallowed by old insulation and old fears. Reed parked 2 blocks away. Mercy arrived moments later. Diesel pulled in, helmet already off. Shade followed, hood up, walking instead of riding. Just 4 of them. Exactly what Reed wanted. 2B Diesel murmured, eyes scanning the building. Mercy tapped her phone. Amelia posted the code once, then deleted it. Probably scared someone would see. Shade crossed her arms. Lights on and 2B curtains shut. Reed looked at them, steady, grounded, ready. We keep this clean, he said. We knock, we listen, we don't escalate unless someone's in danger. They nodded. Reed led the way across the cracked asphalt boots, whispering against the cold ground. The night smelled like damp concrete, and something metallic, maybe old pipes, maybe nerves. Inside the stairwell, every footstep echoed too loudly. The building walls felt close, the paint peeling in strips like skin shedding under pressure. They stopped outside 2B. Reed tilted his head, listening. At first, nothing. Then a muffled voice. Sharp, male, agitated. Reed's pulse tightened, but stayed even. He knocked. Slow, controlled. The voice inside paused. A second voice, young, shaking, whispered something Reed couldn't make out. Then footsteps approached. Mercy shifted her stance, ready but neutral. Diesel stood at the opposite side of the door, arms relaxed. Shade lingered near the railing, keeping the exit route clear. The door opened 2 inches. A girl's face appeared through the gap, 16, maybe 17. Eyes red from crying cheek, bruised in a fading purple bloom. Amelia. She froze when she saw Reed, her fingers trembling on the chain lock. "Did you post it?" Reed asked, softly. Her eyes dropped. She nodded. Reed's voice stayed low. "Is someone hurt?" She shook her head quickly, then hesitated. That hesitation told Reed everything. Behind her, a man's voice barked. "Who is it?" She flinched. Reed didn't move, didn't raise his tone. "Ask him to come to the door." Amelia swallowed hard and stepped back. She didn't close the door. She just let it swing open wider. Her father appeared, a tall man's shoulders, slouched with the kind of exhaustion that morphs into anger too quickly. His eyes were glossy with alcohol, jaw clenched. He looked Reed up and down. "What's this?" he snapped. "You people think you can knock on my door," and Reed didn't respond to the hostility. He focused on the tension in the man's posture, the redness around Amelia's eyes, the cluttered apartment behind them. "We're checking in," Reed said calmly. "Someone asked for help." "I didn't," the man shot back. Reed tilted his head. "She did." Amelia's breath hitched. Her father turned on her so fast, Reed felt the shift before it happened. Reed stepped forward, sliding his foot into the doorway, not forcing, just preventing it from closing. "No one's here to fight," Reed said. "We just want to make sure everyone is safe." The man's breathing grew louder, uneven. "You think I hurt my kid?" he barked, voice cracking at the edges. She doesn't listen. She runs her mouth." She, Sir Mercy, cut in gently. "We're not here to judge. We're here because she was scared." The man's face twitched. Something old and wounded crossed his expression. Shame. Confusion. Maybe both. He staggered back a step. Not aggressive. Just collapsing inward. Amelia's shoulders loosened with a gasp. Reed exhaled through his nose. This wasn't a fight. This was a fracture. "Do you want someone to talk to?" Reed asked the man. Not a threat, an offering. The man blinked, swaying. I didn't mean to yell," he murmured. "It's been hard. Everything's been hard." Amelia's eyes filled again, but with something gentler. She whispered, "Dad." Reed nodded to Mercy. She stepped inside, moving with slow, careful tension, checking on Amelia's arm, her breathing, her posture. Diesel leaned against the wall, unobtrusive, but present. Shade kept watch on the hallway. Reed looked at the father. "You're overwhelmed," he said quietly. "But yelling scares her. And someone out there heard that fear." The man wiped a hand across his face. "I don't want to be that guy." "Then start here," Reed replied. Tonight, there was no dramatic apology, no sudden transformation, just a man sitting down heavily on the arm of a couch and pressing both hands to his face. Amelia stepped inside and sat across from him, still cautious, still hurting but safe. Mercy glanced at Reed. "She'll be all right." Reed nodded. They left the apartment slowly, quietly. Back in the stairwell, Shade whispered, "That could have gone sideways fast." "Yeah," Reed said. But it didn't. Diesel slid his hands into his pockets. The code spreading, Reed stepped into the cold night air, breath curling into the darkness. "It's not the code," he murmured. "It's trust." Mercy asked, "You think we're ready for how big this might get?" Reed looked back at the building, one light still flickering behind Amelia's curtain. "No," he said honestly, "but the people who need us don't care if we're ready." He started toward his bike. "We just show up anyway." Every rider followed. And somewhere behind them, a teenager locked her door, breathed easier than she had in weeks, and realized that the world wasn't as silent as she feared. Not anymore. Not as long as someone answered the call. The first time the riders rolled in formation through a neighborhood, it wasn't planned. It wasn't an operation or a call or a crisis. It was something quieter, an instinct they all seemed to share without speaking. Reed had sent a message asking the crew to meet at the old shipyard lot. Just a check-in, just a regroup. But when he arrived, engines were already humming in organized lines. Helmets, strapped, tight jackets, zipped, everyone waiting but not rushing. It felt like something unspoken was ready to move. Diesel rolled up beside him. "Thought we'd take the long way," he said, eyes forward. "Show presence, no stops unless needed." Reed didn't argue. Presence had become their strongest tool. The riders nodded to one another, and the engines lifted into a low, synchronized growl, a sound that didn't threaten but didn't apologize either. Reed pulled down his visor, and the group eased onto Harbor's End Road, flowing into two tight columns, chrome-catching, fading daylight like sparks in slow motion. The town didn't miss it. People stepped out of laundromats, grocery stores, and apartment hallways, watching the line of bikes pass with expressions ranging from cautious curiosity to visible relief. Some parents lifted their children so they could see better. A man taking out his trash lingered at the curb, nodding once when Reed looked his way. The riders weren't fast. They weren't loud. They were deliberate, a slow-moving river of assurance. As they turned onto Briar Street, the same street where Reed had once walked alone as a boy, the engines softened further, almost respectful. Shade drifted slightly behind him, keeping the line tight. Mercy scanned the sidewalks. Hawk watched windows. Diesel trailed just enough to see the whole formation. Reed felt awareness stir around them, like the street was taking a breath for the first time in a long time. 2 blocks ahead, a door banged open. A teenage boy burst onto the porch holding his little sister's hand. Both stared at the riders, breaths misting in the cool evening air. The girl couldn't have been older than 6. She clutched a pajama-clad teddy bear against her chest. Reed tapped lightly on the handlebar, subtle a signal. The formation slowed. Not stopped. Just slowed enough that the kids wouldn't feel overwhelmed. The boy raised his free hand in a hesitant wave. Shade waved back without removing his helmet. The girl grinned, ducked shyly behind her teddy bear, then peeked out again. Reed felt something shift in the group, an almost imperceptible softening that spread from rider to rider like warmth through cold water. This wasn't intimidation. This was visibility. This was a promise in motion. They continued down the street, tires whispering across uneven pavement. A woman watering plants on her balcony paused, watching as the procession curved beneath her window. For a moment she froze, eyes, worried posture tense, but when Reed turned his head and nodded once, she returned the gesture with a tight, grateful smile. Near the corner of Maple and Dunn, a patrol car passed the opposite direction. The officer inside slowed, eyes, narrowed at first, then relaxed when he recognized the riders. He gave a small salute against his steering wheel. Reed returned the nod. Coexistence. Not conflict. Not competition. Just acknowledgement. A few blocks later, Mercy tapped her blinker, another silent code, and all engines eased into a stop along the curb in a clean, unified arc. Not blocking the road, not imposing, just pausing. It wasn't planned. It didn't need to be. Neighbors leaned out from porches and stairwells, curious. A child on a tricycle rolled closer, no fear in her eyes at all, just fascination. She pointed at Shade's bike. "It's shiny," she whispered to her mother. Shade chuckled behind his visor. "That it is kid." Reed parked in the center of the line, the anchor point. He removed his helmet, the evening breeze brushing his sweat-damp hair. For a moment he just listened. Not to engines, not to police sirens, not to shouts, but to the silence, a different silence than the one he'd grown up with. This one wasn't made of fear. This one was made of reassurance. Diesel stepped beside him. Feel that Reed nodded. Yeah. Presence mattered. It reshaped the street without a single fist raised. Without a single threat spoken. People felt safer just knowing someone was watching. Someone who cared. Someone who wasn't paid to look away. The girl on the tricycle rolled up to Reed, now wide-eyed. Her mother rushed behind her, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. "She doesn't understand. She understands enough," Reed replied gently. He crouched down so he wasn't towering over the girl. She giggled and asked, "Are you superheroes?" Reed felt a tightness in his chest, not painful, not heavy, but unexpected. "No," he said softly, "just people who show up." Her mother's eyes softened with something like relief. Mercy approached, handing the girl a small, reflective sticker shaped like a star, something she kept for kids exactly this age. "For your helmet," Mercy told her. The girl gasped. "I don't have a helmet." "Then get one," Mercy smiled. The moment lingered, gentle light, a kind of peace Reed didn't often feel. When the riders mounted up again, the neighborhood seemed to shift with them. Conversations resumed. A few people waved. A porch light clicked on. A distant dog barked once, the sound drifting through the cooling air. Engines ignited soft, almost like clearing throats. As the line rolled forward, Reed checked the rear view. He saw people standing taller. Windows cracked open, a few faces no longer hiding behind curtains. The street wasn't silent anymore. Not because of noise, but because silence no longer meant fear. Reed tightened his grip on the handlebars. They rode on smooth, steady, unwavering, and for the first time the town moved with them, not away from them. Tonight wasn't about danger, it was about dignity, and the street felt it. The meeting at City Hall wasn't meant to be public. It wasn't meant to be loud or crowded or filmed on half the town's phones either. It was supposed to be a quiet discussion about public safety concerns raised by recent motorcycle gatherings. Those were the exact phrases in the letter Reed received, words chosen to sound neutral but soaked in suspicion. By the time the riders arrived, the parking lot was already overflowing. Neighbors, parents, teens, elderly couples leaning on canes, people Reed recognized from dim hallways and shadowed porches. People he'd seen only in passing eyes, lowered struggles hidden. They weren't hiding now. They stood outside the double doors of the municipal building like a wall, one built without leather or bikes, but with something just as strong. Reed hadn't asked anyone to come, but they did. Not for the riders, for what the riders represented. Mercy stepped beside him. "Someone leaked the agenda," she murmured. "People didn't like what they saw." Diesel cracked his knuckles. "Good. Let them hear what the town actually thinks." Inside, the meeting room was packed past capacity. The council members shifted nervously behind their long wooden table, papers stacked high like barriers. The police chief sat stiffly near them, expression unreadable. At the front, a microphone waited, cold, metallic, centered under fluorescent lights that buzzed like irritated insects. The council chair cleared his throat. "We're here to address community concerns regarding the unauthorized activities of a recently formed motor group." Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered sharply, "Unauthorized. They saved my neighbor." Another voice added, "They're the only ones who answer calls in our building." Reed stood at the back, arms crossed, jaw locked. He hated public attention. He hated microphones. But he could feel dozens of eyes on him, some pleading, some supportive, all waiting. Mercy nudged him. "Go." Reed didn't move at first. He wasn't afraid, but something inside him resisted stepping into the spotlight. He'd spent years shrinking himself to survive. Attention felt like a threat. Then someone approached him. A boy. Small. Quiet. Eyes steady. He tugged Reed's vest lightly. "You helped us," the boy said. "Now let us help you." Reed swallowed hard. He stepped forward. The room hushed instantly as he approached the podium. The microphone felt too close, too exposed. He spoke anyway, voice steady, low, carrying more weight than volume. "We're not here to cause problems," Reed said. "We're here because this town has problems that no one's been willing to look at." A council member interrupted, "Sir, this is not." Reed turned his gaze toward him, calm, unflinching. "We don't break laws," he continued. "We don't start fights. We don't threaten anyone. We show up when someone's scared and no one else listens." The room stirred. People nodded. Someone clapped once quietly. Reed lifted a small folder. He'd brought a thin, modest thing. Inside were printed screenshots, posts, private messages, calls for help, evidence of fear that had lived quietly in the shadows for years. He placed the folder on the council table. "You want to talk safety," Reed said. "Start by reading these." A councilwoman opened the folder. Her expression shifted, first confusion, then concern, then something heavier. "These are recent?" she asked. "Very," Reed said. The police chief stood slowly. "Why weren't any of these reported to us?" A man from the audience called out. "Because you don't come when we call," a woman added. "We report things and nothing changes." Another voice rose, trembling but firm. "They came when no one else did." The room swelled with murmurs, anger, relief, truth finally unhidden. Reed didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "People aren't asking for heroes," he said. "They're asking not to feel alone." The council chair shifted uncomfortably. "So you believe it's your job to enforce safety?" Reed shook his head once. "Not defensive, just clear." "It's our job," he said, "to stand with people until the real help arrives. Nothing more, nothing less." Mercy stepped forward, then placing a flash drive on the table. "We brought proof," she said. "Footage from our helmet cams. Time-stamped. Metadata intact. You'll see we de-escalate, not escalate. Evidence. Visible. Verifiable. Unavoidable." A flicker passed across the police chief's face, not anger but respect. He addressed Reed directly. "You keep things calm," he said. "Your presence helps. I won't deny that." The council chair cleared his throat again. "But we can't endorse." A door slammed open at the back of the room. Every head turned. A woman hurried forward, breathless, holding a white envelope. "I need to say something," she said, stepping beside Reed. It was the mother from a recent call, shaking but unbroken. She pulled a photo from the envelope, her daughter smiling, lifting a small star-shaped sticker. "My kids slept through the night for the first time in months because of them," she said. "You don't have to endorse them, but don't you dare try to stop them." Her voice cracked, but her resolve didn't. Silence, heavy, unmistakable. Then someone near the front started clapping. Slow. Firm. Another joined. Then another, until the whole room was on its feet. Reed didn't smile. He didn't soak in the praise. He just stood there, absorbing the sound like a promise he intended to keep. When the clapping settled, the council chair pushed his glasses up and exhaled. "We will review your proposal formally," he said. "And until then, your group may continue operating so long as you coordinate with law enforcement." Reed nodded once. "We already planned on it." The meeting adjourned. People flooded the aisles surrounding Reed, not with chaos but with gratitude, soft thanks, gentle handshakes, a few tears, a few hopeful smiles. Mercy leaned close and whispered, "That wasn't just approval." Reed looked around the crowded hall. "No," he murmured. "That was a turning point." He stepped outside. The night air was cool, street lamps glowing steady. But for the first time, Reed didn't feel like he was standing against something. He felt like he was standing with something, a town finding its voice, a community unlearning silence, a movement being named in real time. Tonight wasn't about defending what they did, it was about proving why it mattered, and the whole room felt it. Trouble didn't announce itself that night. It didn't roar or snarl or break glass. It arrived subtly like a bad note in an otherwise steady rhythm. Reed was finishing paperwork at the garage when Mercy's voice crackled through the comm channel sharper than usual. "We've got a problem. Big one." Reed straightened. "Where Northline Grocery? Back parking lot." Before she finished, Reed was already on his bike. "Northline Grocery, 1113 p.m. The back lot was dim, lit only by a flickering security lamp that looked seconds away from giving up entirely. Boxes of discarded produce sat piled near the dumpsters, and the air smelled of wet cardboard and old refrigeration units. But the real tension sat in the center of the lot. 3 men, leather jackets not belonging to any local crew. Drunk, loud, shoving a young cashier against a delivery truck. Mercy stood 10 feet away, hands raised, not scared, just controlled, blocking their route toward the girl. Shade and Cutter were positioned behind her, staying wide, staying ready. The men weren't responding to reason, they were responding to ego. Reed pulled in quietly, engine cutting off with a soft, metallic sigh. The sound made the men turn, and their posturing shifted, a dangerous mix of bravado and sloppiness. The tallest one squinted at Reed. "You, the hero people been whining about Mercy," shot Reed a look, warning him not to take the bait. Reed didn't. He stepped forward with that same calm presence that had steadied so many rooms. Hands relaxed, shoulders loose, voice level. "Let her go. We'll talk." The man dragged the girl closer, his grip tightening on her wrist. She winced. "Back off," he snapped. She gave us lip. "We're teaching her not to." Reed's face hardened. "I'm not repeating myself." Shade shifted slightly at his flank. Cutter's boots angled toward the aggressors. Mercy stepped just enough to block the girl's view, shielding her even without closing distance. The tallest man laughed too loudly, fear disguised as swagger. "You think you run this town now?" Reed didn't answer, didn't blink, and that was what set the man off. He shoved the girl to the pavement. She cried out as her elbow scraped concrete. That was the moment everything inside Reed went steel solid. He didn't rush, he didn't yell, he didn't flex, he just moved toward her. And the tallest man, now panicking at his own loss of control, lunged. He swung, a big, wild, sloppy arc. Reed stepped back half a foot. The fist missed by inches. Reed didn't strike. He didn't hit back. He didn't even touch the man. He just let the man's own momentum send him stumbling forward into the side of the delivery truck with a thud that rang out through the lot. That should have ended it. But pride never goes quietly. The man roared, grabbed a broken pallet slat from the ground and raised it like a bat. Mercy shouted, "Reed!" Reed turned too late to avoid the fact that the man had crossed a line Reed never wanted crossed. He wasn't aiming at Reed. He was aiming at the girl still trying to push herself off the concrete. Reed's body reacted before thought had time to catch up. He lunged, stepping between her and the raised weapon, catching the man's wrist mid-swing. The wooden slat cracked against his forearm, splintering on impact, sending jagged shards across the pavement. Pain shot up Reed's arm. He didn't care. He twisted the man's arm not to break it, but to stop him, pinning it behind his back and lowering him to his knees with controlled force. Diesel arrived, then heavy footsteps pounding through the lot as he restrained the second man. Shade disarmed the third with a single move, kicking the dropped pipe across the pavement. Sirens wailed in the distance. And for the first time, Reed didn't feel the sirens were chasing them. They were coming to finish what had already been contained. The police car skidded into the lot. Officers jumped out, hands hovering near holsters, tense, until they saw who had already taken control. One officer recognized Reed instantly. "We got it from here." Reed released the man, stepping back without argument. The girl was sitting up now, clutching her scraped elbow, tears cutting clean lines down her dirt-smudged cheeks. When Reed knelt beside her, she flinched, then froze, then softened. "You're safe," he said quietly. "He won't come near you again." She stared at him, as though seeing safety for the first time in months. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know who else to call." Reed looked over at Mercy, Shade, Diesel, Cutter, his people standing steady under the failing lights. "You called the right ones." One of the officers approached, holding his notepad. "What exactly happened?" he asked. Reed didn't speak. He didn't have to. The girl lifted her chin, voice firm despite the tremor. "They attacked me," she said. "The riders saved me." The officer nodded. "We'll need their statements." Mercy stepped forward. "You'll have them." The aggressors were handcuffed, loaded into the cruiser, and driven away, shouting excuses that evaporated into the cold night air. The parking lot fell silent. Reed exhaled, slowly, arm throbbing under the sleeve. Diesel grunted. "You good?" "Yeah. Your arm says otherwise." Reed flexed his fingers. "Just a bruise." Mercy arched a brow. "That's more than a bruise." Reed shook his head. "Doesn't matter." Shade crossed his arms. "He went after a kid. You did what you had to." Reed didn't argue, didn't justify, didn't brag. He simply watched the girl climb into the back of the ambulance, paramedics closing the door gently behind her. A life not broken tonight. A wound not deepened. A fear answered. As the ambulance pulled away, Mercy stepped beside him. "He escalated first," she said. "He caused his own fall." Reed nodded. "That's how it should be. If anyone falls, it won't be because of us." Diesel tilted his head. "You know what tonight means, right?" Reed looked out across the lot. The broken pallet, the fading tire marks the splintered wood at his feet. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It means the line just got thinner." He tightened his gloves, his injured arm aching. "And we'll stand on it." Tonight didn't test their strength. It tested their restraint, and restraint won. The morning after the grocery lot incident, the town woke differently. Not with fear, not with rumor, but with clarity. Headlines shifted from whispers to declarations. Riders prevent assault. Behind, local market. Community group stops. Violence without force. Town sees lowest weekly emergency calls in months. Reed didn't go looking for any of it. He wasn't glued to screens, wasn't following comments, wasn't standing in front of shop windows reading printouts taped to the glass. He just rode, quietly, steadily, through streets that no longer hid their wounds. The morning air held the damp chill of early autumn, soft wind brushing dried leaves along the curve. Reed's bike rumbled beneath him, not loud, not demanding, just present. A reminder of everything that had shifted. Down Harbor's End Road, people glanced his way, not startled, not wary, but with a kind of settled acknowledgement. Some waved, some nodded. Some simply met his eyes, and that alone was enough. A block further, a woman stepped out of a bakery holding 2 paper cups. She hesitated, then approached, as Reed stopped at a red light. "You were there last night," she said, offering 1 cup. "My niece was the girl working at the grocery." Reed blinked, taken off guard. "She okay, she slept," the woman said. For the first time in weeks, Reed accepted the cup only because refusing felt wrong. "Glad she's safe." "She is," the woman replied softly. "Thank you." He didn't know what to say to gratitude he never asked for. He nodded, rolled on, let the engine swallow the awkwardness. The warehouse, late afternoon. The riders gathered without being called. Diesel sat on a crate elbow, wrapped after taking a hit the night before. Shade polished his helmet absently. Cutter leaned against the wall, nursing a bruised shoulder. Mercy paced slowly, checking her watch, though she wasn't waiting for anything. Reed entered last. They all looked up. Mercy spoke first. "Town wants to meet with us again. This time, it's not a hearing. It's a partnership proposal." Shade let out a low whistle. "Didn't see that coming." Diesel raised a brow. "You ready to be official?" Reed didn't answer right away. He set his gloves on the table, then lowered himself into the old rolling stool he always used when he needed clarity. "It's not about being official," he finally said. "It's about staying honest." Cutter nodded, meaning, "We don't become enforcers," Reed said. "We don't become heroes. We don't become a replacement for police or social workers." Mercy stopped pacing. "So what do we become?" Reed met each of their gazes in turn. "The same thing we've been," he said. "A reason people don't feel alone." Diesel chuckled softly. "You sound like you practiced that." "I didn't." Shade leaned forward. "Then what's the next move?" Reed stood slowly, walked toward the back office, and retrieved something from the drawer. Not a weapon, not evidence, not a patch. A simple leather-bound journal. He placed it on the table. "What's that?" Cutter asked. Reed slid it open to the first blank page. "A record," Reed said, "of every call, every intervention, every door, for accountability, for truth, for anyone who comes after us." Mercy smiled. "A legacy." Reed shook his head, though gently. "A guide." The riders gathered around the table, the room filling with the soft hum of the overhead lamp and the faint smell of motor oil. Reed wrote the date at the top of the page. Below it he wrote 6 words: "Show up, stand firm, leave whole." Shade exhaled. "That's our code now, it's our promise," Reed said. Before anyone could respond, the warehouse door creaked open. A boy peeked inside, short hair, small shoulders, familiar eyes. Ethan. He stepped in, holding something wrapped in brown paper. He looked at Reed, then at the riders, then back again, as if making sure he wasn't interrupting something important. Reed crouched to meet him at eye level. "Hey, kid." Ethan held out the wrapped bundle. hands trembling, trying to be brave. Reed took it carefully and peeled back the paper. It was a drawing, done in colored pencils. Simple lines, bright colors, a row of motorcycles, a small figure in a too big leather jacket, and above them written unevenly but clearly, "Thank you for coming." Reed didn't feel the room go quiet, it simply became quiet. Ethan pointed to the tiny figure in the drawing. "That's me." Reed nodded, throat tight. "I see that." The boy added, "Mom says, sometimes the world needs people who don't look away." Mercy wiped her cheek. Shade pretended he wasn't emotional. Diesel didn't bother pretending. Cutter knelt next to Ethan. "That's a good way to say it." Ethan nodded, clutching the straps of his backpack. "I just wanted you to know I'm okay now. Really okay." Reed placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Good. That's all that matters." The boy's smile was small but real. He waved once, then ran out the warehouse door. The afternoon light caught him turning the dust in the air to gold as he disappeared down the street. Reed looked at the drawing again, simple lines, but full of something enormous. He set it beside the journal, not inside it, beside it. So it would be the first thing anyone saw. Diesel finally broke the silence. "Guess that's the real partnership proposal." Mercy smirked. "Better than anything City Hall could draft." Reed breathed out slowly. The world outside the warehouse felt the same: cars, passing dogs, barking, the low hum of tired engines, but something inside him had settled. Not peace, not pride, purpose. He closed the journal, placed a hand on its cover, and spoke quietly, "Let's keep our promise." The riders nodded one by one. Reed stepped toward his bike, sunlight fading behind him, the drawing still warm in his hand. He didn't start the engine. Not yet. He just stood there, letting the weight of everything, every door, every street, every call settle into place. A town exhaled. A boy healed. A group found direction. And a man who once walked through fear alone finally understood his place in the world. Real strength, Reed thought, isn't loud. It's steady. In the end, this story isn't just about bikers or bravery, it's about the quiet, stubborn strength it takes to show up when silence feels easier. Many people live behind thin walls and thinner hope, carrying bruises no one sees. And the hardest part isn't always the danger, it's the feeling that no one will come. What Reed and his riders offered wasn't violence or vengeance, it was presence. A reminder that dignity grows when someone simply refuses to look away. In real life, too, injustice thrives in the dark corners where people convince themselves, "It's not my business." But as the old American saying goes, evil wins when good men do nothing. Sometimes standing up isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's a hand held out on a bad night, a neighbor knocking to check in, or the courage to admit, "I need help." And for those who carry old wounds, the childhood fears, the abusive voices, the years of shrinking yourself, this story hopes to whisper something simple but true. Your worth is not defined by the worst thing someone did to you. You deserve safety. You deserve to be heard. And you deserve people who won't disappear when the world gets heavy. The path toward justice is slow work, a long road that shows what a horse is really made of, but every small act of compassion keeps that road open for someone else. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections or your own experiences in the comments. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs. And if you'd like more stories that blend emotion, tension, and real-life meaning, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. wishing you calm after chaos, warmth after a long night, and the steady kind of hope that stays.